The African dawn broke with a pale, trembling light that barely touched the cracked earth of the savannah. Dry winds swept across the plains, carrying the scent of dust and brittle grass, whispering through the scattered acacia trees that stood like lonely sentinels. In the distance, a herd of elephants moved slowly across the horizon, their silhouettes stretching through the rising heat haze. At the center of the herd walked a newborn calf, barely a few weeks old, stumbling forward with the fragile determination only the very young possess. His mother nudged him gently with her trunk, guiding him through the maze of legs and shifting shadows. The herd was restless. Tension pulsed through every movement, every rumble, every twitch of an ear. The matriarch, older and wiser than all the others, sensed something wrong in the wind. Predators had been circling for days, waiting for a moment of weakness. The drought had thinned the herd, slowed their pace, and forced them toward shrinking water sources. As the sun climbed higher, their world felt smaller, hotter, more dangerous. The first roar shattered the silence like lightning cracking across the sky. Birds exploded upward in a frantic cloud. The elephants froze, then tightened their formation around the young. The mother of the calf stepped closer, shielding her child with her massive body. Shadows moved in the tall grass. Golden shapes, silent and deliberate, crept toward the herd from multiple sides. Lions, desperate, lean, driven by hunger. The matriarch bellowed a deep, thunderous command. The herd surged into motion, pushing forward in a desperate attempt to break through the ambush. Dust erupted beneath their feet, but the lions were fast. They rushed in, claws tearing at legs, jaws snapping toward the young. The calf stumbled, slipping in the churned dirt. His mother spun around him, trumpeting in terror and fury, kicking at the predators with all the strength she had left. For a moment, it seemed like she would drive them off. But then a lion leapt onto her flank, sinking its teeth into her flesh. Another clamped down on her trunk. The fight became a storm of blood and dust. The herd had no choice. Their survival depended on escape. One by one, they were forced to turn away, fleeing toward open plains. The matriarch hesitated, rumbling mournfully at the sight of the struggling mother and the helpless calf. But even she could not stop. The lions blocked the way back. The herd disappeared into the shimmering distance, leaving the pair behind. The mother elephant, weakened and bleeding, gathered the last of her strength to stand over her baby. She pushed him gently with her trunk, urging him to move, to run, to live. But he stayed pressed against her leg, trembling. A final roar echoed across the savannah, followed by a sickening thud as she collapsed to her knees. Her breaths came in harsh, broken gasps. The calf let out a soft, confused cry. He nudged her face, waiting for her to rise. She did not. Hours passed. The lions eventually retreated, leaving behind only silence and the circling of vultures in the far distance. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and red. The tiny elephant stood alone beside his mother's still body, swaying with exhaustion. He called out into the vast emptiness, but no answer came. His herd was gone. Night crept across the land, bringing the cold and the sounds of scavengers awakening. Panic fluttered inside his small chest as he stepped away from the only protection he had ever known. He wandered through the tall grass, each step heavier than the last. Darkness deepened around him, and with it the quiet terror of being small and alone in a world filled with sharp teeth and hunger. The stars flickered above, distant and indifferent. Somewhere in the night, a lion roared again, and he froze, his body shaken. He did not know where to go or how to survive, only that he must keep moving. His journey into the unknown had begun, shaped by loss so great it would echo through every moment yet to come. The first light of dawn washed over the savannah, softening the harsh shapes of the night. The small elephant calf stood on unsteady legs, his body aching from exhaustion. His eyes were swollen from crying, though he did not understand the meaning of grief. All he knew was that the warmth he longed for was gone, and the world around him felt unbearably large. A faint breeze carried the distant calls of birds beginning their morning songs, yet none of it eased the emptiness that pulsed inside him. Hunger gnawed at his belly. His trunk brushed the dry earth as he searched for any sign of food or comfort. The body of his mother lay behind him, still and silent beneath the rising sun. Something deep within urged him to keep moving, to find safety before predators returned. But every direction looked the same: endless grass, wavering heat, shadows that seemed to stretch too far. Several miles away, a lioness lay curled beneath an acacia tree, her body thin, her breathing shallow. Days earlier, she had lost her last remaining cub to a sudden illness. She had carried the lifeless body for hours before accepting the truth, laying it gently in the shade and walking away with steps that felt heavier than any wound. The pride had moved on without her, sensing her weakness, leaving her to grieve alone. Her world had grown quiet, stripped of purpose. When the faint cry of a young animal drifted across the plains, her ears twitched. At first, she ignored it, assuming it was prey she did not have the strength to chase. But the sound came again, a trembling, desperate call that stirred something deeper than instinct. She rose slowly, muscles stiff, and followed the sound through the tall grass. The calf wandered aimlessly, pausing every few steps to glance around, as if hoping his mother would appear. When the lioness emerged from the grass, he froze. She stood only a few yards away, golden fur glowing under the sunlight, her amber eyes fixed on him. His body shook uncontrollably. He had seen lions before, creatures of power and hunger. Instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs would not obey. The lioness took a single step forward. Her gaze swept over the calf, lingering on his trembling knees and tear-stained face. She could smell his fear, his weakness, the raw vulnerability that should have awakened her predator's instinct. Yet what filled her chest was not hunger. It was something far more complicated, a hollow ache that mirrored her own loss. She circled him slowly. The calf squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for claws and teeth. But they never came. Instead, the lioness lowered herself to the ground beside him, her movements deliberate, non-threatening. She released a low, rumbling sound, almost like a purr, the same sound she had once used to reassure her cubs. The calf cautiously opened his eyes and stared. Minutes passed in a strange, fragile stillness. The calf took a small step backward, then another. The lioness remained where she was, watching him with a quiet intensity. When he swayed and nearly collapsed from exhaustion, she rose again. This time, she approached slowly and pressed her nose gently against his flank. The touch startled him, but it was warm, grounding. She licked the dirt from his cheek, cleaning him the way she once cleaned her cubs. The calf blinked, confusion swirling through his fear. The lioness nudged him toward the shade of a nearby tree, shielding him from the harsh rising heat. When he stumbled, she moved beside him, her body forming a protective barrier. The savannah witnessed an impossible sight, a predator tending to her natural prey. Yet, in that moment, nature's rules, bent beneath the weight of grief and instinct, transformed by loss. The lioness lay beside the calf, curling her body around him as he finally drifted into an exhausted sleep. She kept her eyes open, scanning the plains for danger. She did not know why she had chosen to protect him. She only knew that for the first time since losing her own cub, her heart felt the faintest spark of purpose. For the first time in his short life, the calf awoke not to the comforting rumble of his mother, but to the warm breath of a lioness resting beside him. The morning sun filtered through the sparse leaves overhead, painting shifting patterns across their unlikely forms. The calf blinked, disoriented, his small body stiff from fear and exhaustion. When he saw the lioness, he lurched unsteadily to his feet, unsure whether he had survived the night or wandered into a new danger. The lioness lifted her head, her ears flicking at his sudden movement. She did not rise or bare her teeth. Instead, she watched him with a calm, steady gaze that held no hunger. He took a hesitant step backward, his trunk quivering. She let out a soft chuff, a sound meant to soothe. It was a mother's sound, though he was too young to understand its meaning. What he did understand was that she had not harmed him during the night, even when he had slept defenseless beside her. Hunger gnawed at his belly, sharper now than fear. His weak cries drifted across the savannah. The lioness rose and paced a small circle, restless. She knew he needed milk, food she could not give, but she also knew he could not wander alone. She nudged him gently in the direction of a sparse patch of shrubs. The leaves were tough and dry, barely worth eating, but he tried. His small jaw worked weakly, and frustration trembled through his body. The lioness settled beside him, watching each clumsy attempt. She felt powerless, trapped in a role nature had not prepared her for. Yet every time he stumbled, something inside her tightened, a painful echo of the cub she had lost. She leaned down and licked the dust from his back, smoothing the wrinkles of his skin. He flinched at first, but as the minutes passed, he stopped resisting. Their days began to settle into a strange rhythm. By day, the lioness guided him across the plains, searching for waterholes where the vegetation still clung to life. The calf learned to stay close to her, trusting the shade of her body when the sun grew unbearable. Predators watched from afar, hyenas lurking in twisted laughter, vultures circling overhead, but none dared approach while she remained at his side. At night, when the cold crept in, the calf curled against her warm flank. She did not sleep deeply, always alert to sounds that might signal danger. Her instincts warred within her, the predator, the mother, the survivor, but the maternal instinct won every time. She guarded him with a ferocity that defied logic. One afternoon, as the heat shimmered off the dusty ground, a pack of hyenas trailed them from the ridge. The calf sensed their presence and froze, his breaths coming in quick bursts. The lioness stepped in front of him, her muscles taut beneath her golden coat. The hyenas advanced, emboldened by his weakness. She let out a deafening roar that shook the air. The sound alone sent dust spiraling upward. The hyenas hesitated, regrouping. The lioness lunged forward, slashing at the nearest one with a swipe so powerful it spun the creature sideways. The pack scattered, yelping in defeat. The calf pressed himself against her leg, shaking. The lioness returned to his side and sniffed him carefully, ensuring he was unharmed. He looked up at her with wide, uncertain eyes. Something shifted then, something delicate, but profound. For the first time, he leaned his head against her shoulder, seeking comfort the way he once had from his mother. Day by day, the calf began to mimic the lioness's behaviors. When she crouched low to drink, he dipped his trunk awkwardly beside her. When she paused to scan the horizon, he stood still, raising his small head as high as he could, trying to see what she saw. She taught him how to stay downwind of danger, how to listen for the subtle changes in the grass that signaled movement. He learned slowly, clumsily, but he learned. Their bond deepened in the quiet moments. The lioness grooming the calf after a dusty trek, or the calf following her so closely that his trunk brushed the tip of her tail. She treated him with the same patience she had once reserved for her cubs. And though she could not provide the nourishment he truly needed, she gave him everything else: protection, warmth, companionship. But the savannah had little room for miracles. Other lions had begun to take notice. A pair of lionesses, members of her former pride, spotted her one evening as she and the calf approached a waterhole. Their tails twitched with confusion and suspicion. They growled low, not at her, but at the strange creature by her side. The lioness moved swiftly, placing herself between them and the calf. Her former pride sisters watched her with narrowed eyes, then walked away, unsettled. Word traveled quickly among predators, and soon whispers of a lioness raising an elephant calf drifted through the bush like smoke. Still, she refused to abandon him. When storms rolled across the plains, she shielded him with her body. When the sun burned mercilessly overhead, she led him to pockets of shade she remembered from her cubhood. When fear overtook him, she touched her forehead to his, grounding him with quiet strength. Weeks passed, and the calf grew taller, stronger, more coordinated. He began to run in bounding strides, kicking up clouds of dust that made the lioness blink in amused annoyance. He often waited for her, circling back with small, impatient grunts until she caught up. To any outsider, they were an impossibility, a contradiction, a predator and prey bound together by grief and instinct, rewriting the rules of nature with each shared breath. But to the calf, she had become home, and to the lioness, he had become purpose, a fragile life she was determined to protect, even if the world refused to understand. The dry season tightened its grip on the savannah, turning the plains into a vast sheet of brittle gold. Waterholes shrank to muddy basins, and tension threaded through every creature that depended on them for survival. The lioness and the growing elephant calf had learned to travel farther each day, weaving between clusters of acacia trees and rocky outcrops to avoid predators and to find even the smallest patches of green. Their bond had deepened into something unbreakable, but the land itself was growing hostile. One late afternoon, the horizon shimmered with heat as they approached a distant waterhole. The calf lifted his trunk hopefully, catching the scent of moisture, however faint. His steps quickened, driven by thirst. The lioness matched his pace, though a faint unease flickered through her instincts. She had roamed these plains long enough to know that desperation often drew more than the thirsty. It drew the powerful, the territorial, the deadly. As they crested a low ridge, the lioness halted abruptly. The calf looked back at her in confusion, but she did not move. Her muscles tightened, her tail lowered, and a deep growl rumbled from her chest. Across the clearing, lounging beside the shrinking pool of water, were 3 male lions, massive battle-scarred kings with thick, dark manes and eyes that burned with authority. They were nomads passing through, but their presence meant danger. Male lions tolerated no threats, no outsiders, and no strange young males of any species. The calf sensed the shift in her posture and froze. The males lifted their heads, their gazes locking onto the lioness, then drifting to the calf beside her. Confusion darkened their expressions. A lioness, protecting an elephant calf, shattered the natural order, and in nature, anything unnatural was treated as a threat. The largest male rose to his feet first. Dust cascaded from his mane as he let out a deep, resonant roar that echoed through the clearing. The calf stumbled backward, the sound vibrating through his bones. The lioness stepped in front of him, her body rigid with defiance. She roared back, not in challenge, but in warning. The males did not heed it. They advanced slowly, spreading out to flank her. She snarled fiercely, slashing at the ground with one paw. The calf pressed himself into the curve of her side, trembling. He was larger than before, but still vulnerable, still unable to defend himself against predators who had perfected the art of killing. The first male lunged. The lioness met him head-on, ramming her shoulder into his chest and knocking him sideways. Dust exploded around them as they tumbled together. She rose quickly, swiping across his muzzle, drawing blood. The calf let out a panicked cry, backing away as the other 2 males closed in. The lioness leapt between them, her jaws snapping with desperate fury. She fought like a creature who had already lost too much, like a mother who refused to lose again. But the males were larger, stronger, and united. One crashed into her flank, sending her skidding across the dirt. She scrambled to her feet, panting. Pain lanced through her ribs, but she positioned herself between them and the calf once more. The males began to circle, testing her resolve. She lunged at them repeatedly, her movements fueled by adrenaline and terror. The calf called out in helpless confusion, torn between running and staying near the only guardian he had ever known. The lioness turned her head briefly, meeting his eyes. In that fleeting exchange, something passed between them. Trust, love, and a silent apology for what she knew was coming. The largest male charged again, faster this time. She blocked him, claws slicing through his mane, but another male attacked her from behind, clamping his jaws around her hind leg. She roared in agony. The calf screamed, stamping his feet helplessly. The lioness twisted violently, breaking free, but leaving blood on the ground. She stumbled toward the calf, nudging him hard with her head. He resisted at first, not understanding. She nudged him again, harder, forcing him to move away. Her eyes pleaded with him to run. He took several steps backward, his small heart pounding. She turned back to face the males, her breath coming in ragged bursts. The final attack came swiftly. All 3 males lunged at once. The lioness fought with everything she had left, but the combined weight drove her to the ground. Dust rose in a choking cloud as the struggle blurred into a flurry of snarls and roars. The calf cried out again and again, but the savannah swallowed his grief. When the dust finally settled, the males stepped away, their dominance asserted. They lost interest in the calf, seeing no challenge in a creature that posed no threat to their reign. They left the clearing, melting back into the plains. The calf approached the lioness on shaking legs. She lay motionless, her golden coat stained with dust and blood. His trunk reached out and touched her cheek, hoping she would lift her head, brush against him, reassure him as she always had. But she remained still, her breaths gone, her warmth fading. The world tilted for the calf, first his mother, and now the lioness, who had become his second mother, both gone, taken by a land that demanded too much. He let out a long, mournful cry that echoed across the empty plains. The sound rose and broke, a plea to a sky that could offer no comfort. As the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in muted oranges, the calf stood alone once more. The bond that should never have existed had become the love that cost her everything. And now he faced the world without her. The night after the lioness fell was the longest the calf had ever endured. Darkness stretched endlessly around him, broken only by the faint glimmer of distant stars and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures moving through the grass. The calf stood beside the lioness's still body until the air grew cold and his trembling legs threatened to collapse beneath him. Every sound tightened the knot of fear inside him, yet he could not bring himself to leave her. He nudged her with his trunk again and again, hoping for even the slightest movement. But there was nothing, only silence and the echo of a warmth that had faded too soon. When dawn finally arrived, it brought no comfort. The rising sun revealed the lioness as she truly was now, still, lifeless, and unable to protect him any more. The calf let out a quiet, broken rumble, a sound of mourning that drifted across the empty clearing. He stepped back, sensing that he could not stay. Her protection had ended, but her lessons, those silent, instinctive moments of guidance, remained etched in him, and those lessons urged him to move. He turned away and began walking with slow, uncertain steps. The savannah stretched ahead, vast and unforgiving. Each gust of wind carried unfamiliar scents that made his heart race. His legs trembled not only from grief, but from hunger. He had gone too long without proper nourishment. He tried to nibble on patches of dry grass, but the brittle stalks offered little relief. Hours passed as he wandered. The sun climbed high, pouring heat onto his back. He sought shade beneath lone trees, but he did not linger. He sensed predators moving in the golden haze, shapes that watched him with curiosity sharpened by hunger. Each time he heard a hyena cackle or saw a shadow shift, he remembered the lioness standing in front of him, shielding him. But now he had only his instincts, and those instincts told him to keep moving. Late in the afternoon, the faint outline of a water hole appeared on the horizon. The calf lifted his trunk, catching the scent of moisture. It was weak, barely more than a whisper, but it was enough to stir hope. He pushed on, stumbling through the rough grass until he reached the cracked edge of the shrinking pool. Mud clung to his feet as he stepped into the shallow water and drank greedily, the cool liquid easing the ache in his throat. As he drank, he didn't notice the sound of an engine approaching from the distance. A small research vehicle crested a nearby ridge, its tires cutting through the dust. Inside sat a wildlife conservationist named Daniel Hayes, a man who had spent years studying predator-prey dynamics in the region. He often drove along the remote outskirts of the reserve, documenting animal behavior and checking for poaching activity. He did not expect to find an elephant calf alone. Daniel slowed the vehicle, his brow furrowing. The calf looked thin, terrified, and far too young to be without a herd. He reached for his binoculars, examining the animal closely. There were no adult elephants nearby, no tracks indicating a family had recently passed. Then he noticed something even more unusual, faint traces of lion scent clinging to the calf's skin. It made no sense. Daniel stepped out cautiously, keeping a respectful distance. The calf immediately tensed, taking several frightened steps backward. His ears flared and his trunk lifted uncertainly. Daniel raised his hand slowly, speaking in a calm, low voice. He knew elephants, even young ones, could panic easily. Their memories ran deep, and their emotions ran deeper still. "It's okay," he murmured. "I'm not here to hurt you." The calf did not understand the words, but he recognized the tone. Gentle, steady, not unlike the soothing sounds the lioness had once made. He remained wary, but he stopped retreating. Daniel approached a little closer, careful not to trigger fear. He examined the calf's condition from afar, dehydrated, undernourished, and marked by the kind of emotional distress that only loss could carve into a living being. After several minutes, Daniel retrieved a container of water from his vehicle and poured it into a shallow metal basin. Then he stepped back. Curiosity tugged at the calf. He moved hesitantly toward the basin, sniffed it, then drank. Relief washed over Daniel. The calf was willing to accept help. Night began to settle once more, casting long shadows across the plain. Daniel knew he couldn't leave the calf alone. Predators roamed freely after dark, and an orphaned elephant calf stood no chance against them. He radioed the reserve headquarters, requesting assistance to transport the calf to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center miles away. The process would be difficult and slow, but it was the calf's only chance at survival. As Daniel waited for backup, the calf lingered nearby, still trembling but no longer completely alone. The man kept watch, listening to the distant roars and calls that punctuated the coming night. For now, he would protect the calf, much as the lioness had before him. A new chapter in the young elephant's life was beginning, one shaped by loss, but held together by the unexpected kindness of those willing to fight for his survival. Years passed within the safety of the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, reshaping the calf into a strong, towering young bull. Though he grew under the careful watch of conservationists, the memories of his early life never faded. He remembered the warm trunk of his mother, the fierce protection of the lioness who had sacrificed everything for him, and the endless loneliness that followed each loss. Those memories shaped him more deeply than the passage of time. As he matured, the staff observed something unusual about him. He displayed behaviors no ordinary elephant should, pausing to scan the horizon the way lions did, curling up when resting instead of lying sprawled like other elephants, and releasing deep, throaty grunts at night that resembled a lioness's call. Daniel Hayes, who had first rescued him, often watched in quiet awe. It was as if the young bull carried the spirit of the lioness within him, her teachings etched into the rhythm of his very movements. When he finally reached full strength, the reserve decided it was time to release him back into the wild. The process was slow and careful. A large transport gate opened into a protected section of the savannah, allowing him to step out on his own terms. The bull hesitated only briefly. The wind carried familiar scents, dust, acacia trees, and the distant hint of predators. He lifted his head high, letting the air wash over him like a forgotten song. He was no longer the helpless calf who had wandered alone through the grass. He was powerful now, confident, a towering figure with broad ears and long, curved tusks. Yet, the moment his feet touched the earth of his old home, something stirred inside him, an ache, a memory, a calling. He walked for hours, following a path known only to his heart. The sun dipped low by the time he reached a ridge overlooking a shallow valley. Below, he saw movement, shapes weaving through the grass with fluid precision. Lions. A small pride lounged beneath a cluster of thorn trees, their golden coats glowing in the fading light. His muscles tensed. Instinct urged him to turn away, but something stronger held him still. Among the pride was a cub, small, barely steady on its legs, trailing behind the adults with innocent clumsiness. As the bull watched, the cub wandered too far from its mother, approaching a rocky outcrop without sensing the danger lurking nearby. A lone hyena, gaunt and opportunistic, crept toward the cub, its movements silent and deadly. The cub's mother was too far to intervene. The hyena closed in, its eyes gleaming with hunger. The cub froze, letting out a faint cry. Before the hyena could strike, the bull erupted from the ridge with a powerful trumpet that shook the air. The hyena whipped around just as the massive elephant thundered across the valley floor, each footfall pounding the earth like rolling thunder. The predator backed away, snarling, but the bull did not slow. He charged with full force, and the hyena bolted into the tall grass, barely escaping with its life. The pride snapped to attention, stunned by the appearance of a bull elephant defending one of their own. The cub's mother rushed to her child, nudging it back toward safety. The bull stopped several yards away, his chest rising and falling in heavy breaths. The lion stared at him with a mixture of confusion and wary respect. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then the largest lioness, perhaps the leader of the pride, stepped forward. She held her head high, but did not bare her teeth. Her eyes locked onto his, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, an echo of the bond he once shared with another lioness long ago. The bull lowered his head, not in submission, but in acknowledgment. The lioness let out a soft rumble. The pride slowly relaxed, gathering around the cub, ensuring it was safe. The bull took a step back, then another. He had done what he came to do, though he had not known his purpose until the moment it unfolded. Protecting the vulnerable, standing between danger and the defenseless. These were lessons carved into him by the lioness who had raised him. As dusk settled, he turned and walked away, leaving the pride behind. The lions watched him go, their eyes tracking the silhouette of the giant who had defended their own. He moved with a quiet, steady grace, the fading light outlining the powerful curves of his body. He carried no pride in what he had done, no expectation of gratitude. He carried only the memory of a lioness who had once stood for him in the same way, and through his actions, her legacy lived on. The savannah glowed under the setting sun, the horizon painted in soft shades of amber and rose. The bull walked alone through the tall grass, each step slow and deliberate. The encounter with the lion pride still lingered in his mind, not as a moment of triumph, but as a whisper from the past. The way the lioness had stepped forward, the way the cub had looked up at him with innocence and fear, it all stirred memories buried deep within him. He followed an invisible path across the plains, guided not by instinct, but by something far more fragile, longing. The wind carried faint traces of scents long familiar, dust, old grass, and the distant murmur of life settling into night. As he continued onward, the landscape shifted into a place he had not seen since he had been a helpless calf. The clearing was smaller than he remembered, yet unmistakable. Time had not erased its contours. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, his shadow stretching across the ground. A tree stood alone at its center, its branches twisted with age. Beneath it lay a patch of earth where the grass grew thinner, as if the land itself remembered the weight of sorrow that had once pressed upon it. This was where she had fallen, the lioness who had become his second mother, the one who had loved him despite everything nature said she should be. For a long while he did not move. The silence pressed around him, broken only by the occasional rustle of insects in the grass. Slowly he stepped forward until he stood where her body had once lain. He lowered his head, his tusks framing the earth beneath him. His trunk swept gently over the ground, touching it with a softness that echoed the gesture she had once used to calm him. Though she was long gone, the warmth of her presence seemed to rise from the soil itself. A low rumble vibrated in his chest, deep and mournful. It was not the trumpet of warning or the cry of distress, but a sound shaped by grief, a sound he had not made since the day she died. The air trembled with it, carrying the memory of a bond that had defied everything written into the bones of the savannah. He remained there for hours as the sky shifted from gold to violet to the deep indigo of night. Stars emerged, shimmering like distant embers. Their cold light illuminated the field where predator and prey had once shared a love strong enough to remake the rules of the wild. The bull lifted his head, gazing upward, his breath misted faintly in the cooling air. Behind him, footsteps approached softly. Daniel Hayes emerged from the shadows, having tracked the bull from the reserve's boundaries. He knew this place well. He had found signs of the lioness's last stand years ago. He had hoped the elephant had forgotten, or at least that the memory had softened with time. But he understood now that some scars deepen rather than fade. Daniel stopped a respectful distance away, unwilling to break the moment. In the dim light, he saw the giant animal standing over the sacred patch of earth, still as a carved statue. The quiet sorrow radiating from the bull was palpable. Daniel felt it settle heavy in his chest. "You remember?" he whispered, though he knew the bull would not understand the words. "Of course you do." Elephants remembered everything, every loss, every kindness, every moment that shaped their hearts. And this bull had known loss more intimately than most. Daniel watched as the elephant lowered himself gently to his knees, folding into a position that mirrored the way he had once slept beside the lioness. It was a gesture of devotion, of grief, of gratitude. Minutes stretched into an hour. The moon rose high, casting pale light across the clearing. Somewhere in the distance, a lion roared, a deep, resonant call that rolled across the plains. The bull did not flinch. Instead, he lifted his trunk and released a sound in return, not the cry of an elephant, but a deep, rumbling call shaped uncannily, like the one a lioness might make when calling to her cubs. Daniel's breath caught. It was a tribute, a farewell, a final echo of the bond that had defined the elephant's life. When the bull finally rose, he stood taller than the surrounding trees. He took one last look at the resting place of the lioness, his gaze soft and unwavering. Then he turned away and began walking toward the horizon. His silhouette faded into the tall grass, swallowed by moonlight and shadow. Daniel watched until he disappeared completely. The story of the bull and the lioness would never be recorded in any formal journal. It would not be believed by most. But for those who had witnessed even pieces of it, the truth was undeniable. Love could grow in the unlikeliest places, between the unlikeliest hearts. And as the bull moved on into the night, the savannah seemed to breathe with him, carrying forward the legacy of a lioness who had given everything and an elephant who would never forget.